chugging up. So, or no, it's chug down. No, it's chug down. So it's grapevine. So on the part where you go sideways, grapevine and then turn, like right at the beginning. So grapevine, turn, and when we turn, I think we're gonna go like this, like at like. Because the problem is last year that part, and so we were kind of doing it the other day, and it's chug, grapevine, then turn, chug, grapevine, turn around, and then what's
No, I do. Well, actually, it's green.
yeah, and then it's the and the other problem was everybody's happening at the same time.
It's like waves.
It's like this, yeah, and then the part where where we're going like where we're popping, pop, pop, pop. Yeah. Oh. Well, so this part two, everybody.
Yeah, I know. Like, the other thing is, like she literally, like, let Ethan in without him auditioning because she needed it.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. Because we couldn't, like, she didn't want us to lose the play. We were going to lose 4 and she won. So she convinced Justin, probably, or Justin won it. Yeah. Or so Justin said,
All right, everyone, thank you for coming tonight. Welcome to the star lighting ceremony. This is one of my favorite events at UCC, the other being, of course, the Easter sunrise service. But I like this one better because it's not as early and cold and all that. But no, I was really honored when Carrie asked me to lead it tonight. I've been here so many times, and watching Steve do it means a lot to me and my family, so I'm happy to do that tonight. First, I want to start just with some thanks. Thanks to, well, first the Ruvers family for decorating and particularly hanging the star, because it'd be really awkward if I did this thing without a star above me, so thanks to them. Also to the confirmation students for making us soup tonight, so thanks guys for doing that. And of course to Anthony for playing the piano for us tonight. So tonight we're going to sing some songs, and I'll tell you some stories, and then we'll sing some more songs and all that. You know the drill for most of you. So what we'll do is we'll start with a song. I'll have many songs that'll all be in your hymnals. We're just going to sing the first 3 verses. So if there's more than 3, we'll stop at 3. And we'll start with the first one, First Noel. And that's hymn number 139. So please join me in that. like the battle for that last verse. Are we going to read the hymnal or something we love? Next one is, What Child Is This? Hymn 148. 148. So tonight we come and celebrate a symbol of light, the light above us soon, a star, a Moravian star in this case. But I think lights in the church, of course, are powerful symbols. The star for Christmas, of course, over Bethlehem, we just sung. Even the lights we light every week in church, the candles, stained glass, stories of God, light shining through. They're very powerful in terms of understanding a lot of things, like even outside of church, even Star Wars is light, dark, right? They're pretty powerful symbols. And I think it's for a reason. I think the light really, we identify with these ideas of lights as signs of hope or guiding the way or being able to see, and darkness with this sort of inability to see and being lost. And I think particularly at this time of the year, I think a lot of folks experience a lot of darkness. So it can be a hard time for a lot of people. For you, for me, for all the things. And I think a lot of times, too, in that darkness, it's, we can't see the light. And so I'm going to give you sort of an analogy that might help you or someone you know through this. Well, maybe most of you don't know, many of you know, I think, that I'm a scientist, so I'll use the science angle, of course. So light, as we talk about it and think about it, physicists or other scientists might call it visible light, the visible light spectrum. And that means that we can see light from about 350 nanometers up to 750 nanometers, somewhere in there. And that's what we can see. But of course, there's light above that we call ultraviolet light, which are shorter wavelengths. And below that spectrum, longer wavelengths of light that we call infrared. And we can't see that light, interestingly, right? But it's still considered light. And why is that? Is because, and maybe we're a little self-centered, so we just think about humans and that stuff. But I'm a biologist, so I'm here to teach you some biology, okay? And the idea is that actually there are other animals that can see in those spectrums of light. So anytime you see a boring white flower that a bee is pollinating, you should actually know that there's an incredible pattern on that thing that only reflects in the ultraviolet range. So bees can see that beauty. We cannot, yeah? Also in the infrared, there are animals that can see in the infrared that we can't see. Any guesses on which one I'm going to say? Bullfrogs, right. Of course frogs can see in the infrared. You know I'd work frogs in here somehow, okay? Yeah, frogs, snakes, other animals can see in the infrared, right? And that's sort of interesting as well, partly just to realize that what we see is not all there is to see. And when there's darkness, actually other things can still see that light. And I think one of the more interesting things, too, to share with this last sort of image is this idea that there's also a reason why we can't see in the infrared range. Because it turns out infrared light is also heat, yeah? And as warm-blooded animals, mammals, and things like that, we give off a lot of heat. And why we can't see in the infrared is because we would all be blinded by each other, yeah? Which is kind of interesting when you talk about us being the light. You know that imagery in church? It's literally true, okay? We are made of infrared light, yeah? Other things that can see infrared light, mosquitoes, by the way, see, yeah? They're detecting your heat. They're coming after you for that very reason. I think it's important to think about those in that framework, though, in this image, or maybe I should say lack of image of darkness, is to remember that and think about that. When you're in that space of darkness where you can't see, doesn't actually mean that there's no light. There's lots of light. And that light is surrounding us right now. I mean, the warmth of this church and everything it means to us, but even the warmth of the people around us. Sometimes we can't see the light, but you can still feel that light. So I want to take that image and think about that in a moment later where we have that period of darkness before we light the visible light of that star. Really realizing and understanding those emotions that we feel in that darkness, that there's more to it. There's a way to get out of that. So with that, I'll take a moment. We'll sing the next song, Away in a Manger. This is hymn number 124. And then, O Little Town of Bethlehem, 133. Again, just the first three verses. 133, Little Town of Bethlehem. And so tonight, the symbol that we look at of light, the symbol of light, is this Moravian star above me. And the story of the Moravian star is from the Moravian church, of course. It's one of their sort of critical, powerful symbols. And like we do on the first day of Advent, they hang it and light it. We take that tradition from them. And it's a powerful tradition, but mostly I think just because it's just pretty, right? I mean, it's a good-looking star, really. And where that sort of idea came from, of course, is this story that Steve has told us many times. I verified it. It's mostly true, but I'll just retell it, all right? But this is the idea that Moravian Church is mostly in Germany, present-day Germany, and surrounding countries. And back in the day, kids would go to boarding schools. Young boys would go to boarding schools to get an education, and of course, they would often be sent far away from their homes to get this education. And then during winter, some just too expensive and too much trouble to get them back home. Or if it was a really bad winter, they'd easier and safer for them to stay at the school. And so as the story goes, there was one winter at a particular boarding school where it was just snowed in, and all these kids were there, way more boys than the teachers wanted to handle. And so they tried to come up with some ideas to keep them occupied. And one of the activities that was often done in those boarding schools to teach them geometry was to have them make these three-dimensional shapes. So they were learning about geometry, but then also building them with their hands. And of course, they were just using paper because it was a school. And so the math teacher decided, well, let's try to do something different than these ordinary geometric shapes that we make. Let's try to build a star or something. And so they took one shape that's actually in the middle of that star, sort of a soccer ballish type of shape, and attached all of these pyramids, these points on there. So there's 26 points on that star. And put it together, put a light in it, hung it up, and wow. And so they built a bunch of them. They had a great time, kept them busy. And of course, once school was over, they were able to go back homes and shared them with their families. Teachers shared them with their friends. People thought, wow, this is a great symbol, great thing. And other boarding schools would do this just as a Christmas thing at that point on, kind of spread and caught fire because it was such a cool thing to do and a useful skill. And it was one of these boys at the boarding school, one of these boarding schools that actually later on owned a factory and said, I'm going to just start mass producing these things because people love them and it's great. And he started making these stars for Germany and also sending them all the way back to the United States because there was a large Moravian community here in the United States. And so that became a big symbol both here in the U.S. and overseas. And if you look at Moravian households, but now I think even broader than that, you'll see these things hanging on porches, hanging inside houses, hanging inside churches. So again, a beautiful symbol, just a beautiful star sort of highlighting, of course, the birth of Jesus in Advent season and knocking it off. In the same way that many churches, even us this morning, light that first candle in Advent, this is their symbol to start off the Advent season. So with that, we'll sing our next song, Upon a Midnight Clear. Came Upon a Midnight Clear. That's 131. 131. And so some of you may be thinking, why do we have a Moravian star in the United Church of Christ? That's a different tradition than ours. Of course, you know we love to borrow traditions and use different symbols. But as I was saying earlier, the Moravian Church was very big in eastern Pennsylvania, North Carolina, other parts of the U.S., but in particular in a town called Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where our former pastor Steve Miller was born and raised. Born in Bethlehem. Good luck to the next pastor, eh? But because he was from that tradition, you know, sort of grew up and knew about that Moravian star. And it was actually at that time, back then in World War II, Moravians were, you know, looking for stars around Advent. And, well, weren't getting along so well with Germany, so those weren't being shipped over. And anyway, that factory, it turns out, was shut down for the war effort for Germany. I think they were making leather jackets or something like that, okay? And so there was a huge shortage of these Moravian stars. And so people then just sort of picked up and started making them in their homes, particularly here in the U.S. and in the Pennsylvania area. And so lots of folks were making these Moravian stars. And last year we dedicated this service, we called it the Pop Miller Star Lighting. And that was in reference to the term pop, which the Miller family uses to reference grandfather. And so that's some respect and nod to Steve's own grandfather, who he called Pop Miller, who was one of these star makers in Pennsylvania and made loads of stars all the time for lots of families in need, and even made some and sold them, giving the sort of proceeds to the church to help people. Really, you know, incredible gift for lots of people. And when he passed away, Steve's father, Pop Miller to his kids, took up the trade and started making these stars as well. And one year, Steve's father decided that he found this old star and was going to refurbish it and give it to Steve for his birthday. And he did that. And that's the star that we have hanging above us tonight. So this was a birthday gift to Steve some 20 years ago. And of course, Steve brought it here and started this tradition. and some years after that, Steve asked his dad, you know, where did you get this star from, by the way? And he said, well, I think this star, this is the star we got from the old church. It was in a closet somewhere. The base was there, and I just thought I'll remake the points and give it to you. And he said, oh, well, what years would it have been in that Moravian church in Bethlehem? And he said, well, around the late 50s, early 60s. And Steve said, well, I was baptized during that time in that church, right? Well, I guess so, Steve. And so this, as it turns out, is the very star that our former pastor was baptized under, keeping this incredible tradition alive in his family and sharing with us today. So pretty spectacular sequence of events. And I think Steve kept that tradition very alive, very strong. Many of you maybe know, but he brought his own 2 grandsons, Reese and Ember, here, and blessed them under this very star. Him himself being Pop Miller in that case, yeah? And I think it's just a beautiful sort of story, again, of traditions and connections and family and all these things that sort of what we like to do, right? I think Rhonda said it beautifully at church today, that comfort. We find that comfort. And I think it's more than just comfort. Again, in those times we think about that darkness, I think that's some ways to find our way back by leaning on some of these traditions that we may not understand where they come from or how they come about, leaning on these people. Those are the ways that we sort of find and feel that joy again and that happiness again. So as is the tradition, what we'll do now, we'll sing one more song, Silent Night, and then I'll have the lights turned out, and we'll just sit in the darkness just for a minute. And it could be pretty dark and maybe a little scary, but also that's good, right? Remember, our eyes are adapted for that. We don't want the light. Embrace that darkness for a moment or two. It'll be a beautiful time to sit in silence and in prayer. And then the star will turn on. And as is the tradition, we'll be doing that will mark sort of this beginning of Advent season for us all. And I invite us just to stay silent. You can stay here as long as you need to and sit and reflect on that star. But when you're ready to go, just get up quietly and leave and begin your week in peace and somberness. So with that, let's start our song, Silent Night. This is Psalm 134, thank you.